Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, from wherever you are across the country, because this is a national event. Welcome to Can Startup Stories, and this edition of Can Startup Stories, Investor Tales, Trials, and Tribulations. This is one we've been wanting to do for a while because entrepreneurship and startup life isn't just about those entrepreneurs and founders that are making things happen. It is the entire ecosystem, and the investors, the VCs, are such an integral part of our community here that it's time to shine the light on them. And that is what we're going to do tonight. So we have 5 amazing, diverse speakers here from across the country that are going to share their stories, Can Startup Stories style, as we do. So it's however they want to present and tell their story, however they want to do that. So really excited, really looking forward to this tonight. So my name is Colin Weston, and I am the community leader for Startup Vancouver. And Startup Vancouver is one of over 40 chapters of Startup Canada across the country. And Startup Canada has been going for over 10 years now, and it is the voice for the over 3.5 million entrepreneurs we have in the country. And our why as a community, startup community, and also a Startup Canada, is to give entrepreneurs the best chance of success by connecting them to each other, to resources, to events, mentors, perhaps even investors, what we're talking about tonight. And that's what we do and why we do it, is to be that connective tissue within our ecosystem to make good things happen. So I do want to start by mentioning that I am joining you this evening from the traditional and unceded Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and very honored to be doing that this evening. And I know we have many people across the country that are also going to acknowledge that of the unceded territory that they reside on also. So Startup Vancouver, best way to connect with us is through social media. We're very, very active on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So if you want to connect with us and find out about more events, or even, as I said, to help build the community and engage with us, that's what we do. Or as we build our team here and write the next chapter, we've been in for 4 years now with Startup Vancouver and found our voice and the value that we add. If you want to get involved, because we are looking to have a succession plan with new leadership to take it to the next level. So if that's something that interests you, to make it more diverse, resilient, and sustainable, please let me know, because I'd love to talk to you about that. So this evening, if you're into the social media live tweeting or social media posting thing, please include Can Startup Stories, the hashtag, so that we can track the impressions that we have to see the value that we're adding for everybody here, especially for our 5 speakers here. We want to celebrate them, shine the light on them, and give them as much of a bump as we possibly can here tonight. So very quickly, with Startup Vancouver and Startup Canada, we do have 2 pillars, 2 core values. The first one is that we collaborate rather than compete. And this is exemplified and manifested in events like this. And we could not do an event like this without the amazing partnerships that we have with organizations throughout our innovation ecosystem. And OKR, which is Old Kent Road Financial, I've had a great relationship with them for a couple of years now. And with Blavik, who you're going to meet this evening, who is our co-host and MC for tonight, we've been bashing this one around for a few months, and they stepped up very generously and offered to be the presenting partner tonight. So without them, we would not be able to bring you this impactful event this evening. And with our supporting partners, we have Futurpreneur Canada, which has been supporting Can Startup Stories for some time now, and also our good friends at SFU VentureLabs, that without them, they're doing all the behind the scenes work. We've got Noelle and Pauline, who are being the executive producers tonight, and herding cats, which is us, to make all the magic happen. So thank you to SFU VentureLabs and to Noelle and Pauline. I also want to acknowledge our good friends at Startup Canada, who have turned this into a national event through their promotion of it across the country. And this event is part of the Startup Community Empowerment Fund, which we are going to talk about a little bit more between speakers. So thank you very much, Startup Canada, for putting this fund together to also help make these events happen. And the other pillar that is very important for us as far as our core values, and that is that diversity inclusion piece. And that is to make entrepreneurship welcoming and inviting for everyone, no matter gender, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, new Canadians, disabled entrepreneurs. We celebrate and invite and welcome everyone, tech and non-tech. And we've done this through Van Startup Stories, which pre-COVID, we did 11 of them in venue over a year and a half, starting in 2018. This is just one example, of course, celebrating LGBTQ entrepreneurs. And in 2 months from now, we'll be celebrating Black entrepreneurs for the second year in a row in July. In September, we'll be celebrating mom and dad entrepreneurs, first time we've done that one. And then in November, we are going to be celebrating Indigenous entrepreneurs for the third year in a row. And that event just keeps getting bigger and bigger. We're very, very proud and honored to be part of that. So also, if you're not able to watch all this event tonight, hopefully you can all stick around for the 2 hours this evening. Or if you want to rewatch one of these events, one of the speakers, or see some of the previous events. 2 months ago, we celebrated women entrepreneurs. In January, mental health awareness for entrepreneurs, impactful speakers, dynamic stories. You can go to our YouTube channel there, and why don't you subscribe and like while you're there? I guess that's what they say. That's what YouTubers say, right? So I guess that's what I'm supposed to say. This evening, we plan this to be an interactive and engaging 2 hours of conversation. The way this is going to work is our usual format that everybody seems to love, and that is each of our speakers has 12 to 14 minutes to tell their story any way they want, and then Blavik is going to then step in as the MC, and he is then going to curate and moderate the questions that all of you put forward in chat or the Q&A. And he also has some questions that he's going to roll out too. And occasionally I'm going to jump in also to throw a question or two out that I might have also. So yes, please be active here because we'd love to hear your thoughts. Once again, my name is Colin Weston. You can connect with me there through my email, also through Twitter. Probably the best way to get a hold of me. Thank you so much for joining this evening. I hope you enjoy, I know you'll enjoy the 5 stories you're going to hear tonight. I'm excited to hear them, and I hope you are too. So with that, I am going to turn it over now, and perhaps we can stop sharing the screen, to Bhavik Chauhan, who is the Vice President of Business Development with OKR Financial. Bhavik, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you again.
You too, Colin, and
I'm
love
looking
this.
forward to this.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, we've got some 5 impactful people, and it sort of hits the mantra for OKR Financial because we're trying to make a big impact on the Canadian tech ecosystem. Recently, we made a big announcement saying we've got $150 million to deploy into this tech ecosystem. So, entrepreneurs, ideas and things like that, reach out to us. So what do we do at OKR Financial? It's sort of, you had a brief slide up there, is we have money to sort of deploy into the system, and we utilize 3 different verticals. And the first one is we leverage government funded programs, whether it's tax credits, film tax credits, digital media, or SHRED, which is a common one, or the government grants. There's ways around that as a startup to sort of maximize on its funding. So we have ways and tools and sort of say non-dilutive financing, leveraging that without giving away your company. So that's one of our main focuses. And then we have asset-based lending as well, where the banks and BDCs can't help you out, but we have mechanisms and ways that we may be able to explore that get you some money through the door. And then we have our venture fund, which we launched last summer, building up slowly. We're investing in companies to help them grow. And if it makes sense at the right time, OKR can be a good synergy partner. So, I mean, we can keep going on about OKR, how great we are and making an impact, but we also work with some great partners like Startup Vancouver and the other organizations nationally, trying to educate them at, working as a community and working with partners is how you're going to grow. And that's how we've grown. We've been working with a lot of partners nationally, whether it's in advisory capacity or financing. So I think that's OKR Financial. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me via my email and LinkedIn and other social media slots, or anyone in my team as well. So I'm not sure if you want to introduce the first guest.
Not me. Now I am done. This is now you're running the ship now, my friend. So I'm going to turn off my camera and my mic now. Hand it over to you to introduce our first speaker of the night, who is Kookai Chaimahawong. So please, there's Kookai's joined us now, and take it away. You two.
There you go. So pleasure to have you online, Kookai, and let's hear your story. She's as you can see, the VC associate of Pangaea Ventures, and so let's hear about your story, Kookai. How did this all begin for you?
Thank you. So do I share my slide here? Because I sent the slide in earlier.
Yeah, I believe if you
Or
scroll across, it should be your slides now. You can
There we
control
go.
it.
I don't think so. My slide's really long. Sorry, 1 second. Oh, perfect. Great. Awesome. So I thought I would do something fun today because, this is sort of my second event of the day. And so, when Colin reached out to me and said that, he wanted to hear sort of like super raw story, I thought, why not get vulnerable in front of the crowd too? I feel like entrepreneurs do that for us every day, every single pitch that I listen to, basically. So my name's Kookai. I'm an associate at Pangaea Ventures. I'm at the office today, based in Vancouver. Pangaea has been investing in hard tech companies, so advanced materials innovations, for the past 21 years. I joined the fund about 3 years ago. I'm the only associate at the fund currently. And way back when, per the slide, I used to introduce myself as the least likely venture capitalist. Anyways, I practiced this once. I thought I was going to do a Pecha Kucha style. So I hope that it is within 12 or 14 minutes. It could be very well too short or too long. But please cut me off if I go over time. So I just want to go over my story, why, I used to think that way. So I am originally from Thailand, from Bangkok City, born and raised, actually raised from around the world. I grew up in Australia, in London, in Los Angeles, in Paris. So, I call myself like a third culture kid because, I kind of identify myself as, the West and the East, kind of the bridge between the two. And that's just, who I am. And I love, all cultures. So, I am from Thailand. After I graduated from my undergrad from the university in Thailand, I joined a startup social enterprise. I was the first hire. Startup and social enterprise were a very new concept in Thailand. No one ever heard about startup. No one ever heard about social enterprise before. In fact, social entrepreneurship in Thailand at the time wasn't even registered as a business. So, we were sort of the first wave of creating sort of such movement way back when. My parents were so confused, when I told them that I am working at a startup because they had no idea what a startup was. But one thing rang true. My startup that I was working at the time, had a mission to, get the public participation into supporting social and environmental causes. So, the platform that we had is very much similar to Groupon. But instead of purchasing coupons, you select which donations you want to support, and in return you get the rewards from the businesses. So anyhow, the business really was sort of something fundamental to myself and to my values, which is the social aspect of things and supporting things that are larger than just businesses. And afterwards, I got a chance to work at the United Nations. So, I worked at UNDP, launched the SDG goals, which you probably have seen, the 17 colorful goals that we're hoping to achieve by the year 2030. UN at the time saw that, I was really creative in bringing businesses together with the public and creating some sort of like innovation kind of like models to support social and environmental causes. So they were like, why don't you just come in and help us with, this partnership strategies? We want to get the private corporations to be interested in the SDGs, which at the time, no one knew of. Now SDGs are more relevant than ever. At the time, really no one was talking about the SDG, so we had to start from scratch. And they were like, oh, we also want the public to, be aware about, the goals that we're trying to achieve here, collectively, globally as well. But then I realized it was such an uphill battle. I actually struggled a lot to actually get the public to be interested. Maybe we're from a developing country, Thailand is still developing, is still emerging. It's not exactly like Canada. People need to feed themselves first before thinking about the social aspects of things. And so I found myself, having to convince, the public and also private corporations. I used to call myself a Robin Hood at the time because I feel like I would steal, try to steal money from, the spare changes of corporations to support social and environmental causes. And so that actually brought me to Canada. So I realized that, if really to move the needles in the world, you need, private corporations, to be supportive and to change the ways that they do things, I need to understand their businesses. And so that led me to UBC Sauder School of Business. You got to give a shout out to them actually, because I selected UBC and Vancouver in particular because of the sustainability integrated course into the businesses program. It's more than just finance, accounting. It's actually how do you integrate sustainability, sustainable mindset in launching new products, in accounting, in all aspects of businesses. And so when I was a part of Sauder, Pangaea Ventures actually reached out to me. And at the time, all my friends asked me, why? Why you? You didn't come from a finance background. You worked at a social enterprise. You worked at the UN. Why you? Why a VC would reach out to you? And the reason that everyone asked that, and I think, this graph probably explains it best. I was from the opposite spectrum imaginable at the time. Now I have a point that it's actually emerging, and I think we're leading sort of that change. But it was really an opposite spectrum from just pure impact, making missions to investing for the highest financial returns. I didn't understand myself too, because I was really puzzled by the fact that everyone's really driven to think about what's the return on investments, what's the dollars, and then here I went, going, what about the impact? But the reason that Pangaea actually invited me to sort of join the fund at the time was that they were curious about the impact that was being created by the portfolio companies as a result of their investments. And so, I got a chance to obviously look at the portfolio companies. We invest in, clean technologies, ag technologies, health technologies, food technologies. And so, there are definitely impact being created as a result of our investments. We just never quantified it. So, I sat down with the team, quantify the impact that was being created, and try to look at ways that we can integrate impact investing into our strategies. And I realized, oh my goodness, this is where I wanted to be. This is sort of the key industry that is going to solve my frustration. Pangaea is backed by 25 strategic corporations, chemical companies. There's Adidas, which is probably most well known to everyone. And so that kind of solves sort of, everything kind of comes together and makes sense. I felt like a Robin Hood trying to rob corporations to support social environmental causes. Here I am finding innovations that corporates can adopt, and for us to invest in and also making money from it. And you could argue that it's more sustainable if you're able to actually invest in companies that are able to sustain themselves versus just donation. And I realized this is where I wanted to be. I don't know how long I have left, but I'm just going to keep going. But, through sort of that realization, it still feels like an out of place, an out of sort of world for me. This is a story that I love telling people. The uphill battle of being a female investor in this space is real. The first time I ever, got a chance to go to an industry event for only investors only is run by the CVC, the Canadian Venture Capital Association and Private Equity Association. I was the only female and minority there. But it's not just that. And that was the first time ever I felt like, oh, wait a minute, I look different. I sound different. This is something odd. But I was actually asked by my current friend today, but at the time we weren't friends. He actually asked me to pour him a glass of wine because he thought I was a waitress. And just let that sink in a little bit here. I worked at the UN. Actually, I shared the same floor as UN Women. So, I knew about the diversity problems. I never experienced it myself. And then that was the time that I realized that, wait a minute, VC has a diversity problem. And it's a really big problem. So I started, looking around at different funds and realizing that there's barely any women in the fund. And then I started looking at how VC makes investment decisions, just being a part of sort of the deals team, sourcing and all that. And I realized, wait a minute, if everyone's thinking the same thing from the same background, we're only investing in a certain types of startup companies. We're never going to provide that fundings to the other untapped opportunities just because the people around the table don't understand the problems that are being solved through the solutions, whatever, be it femtech, being, the technologies for immigrants or anything similar along the lines. And so for me, that was such an obvious truth. And I just didn't understand why no one talked about it. 3 years ago, diversity issues were identified, but it wasn't talked about it as much as today. So me as an investor, and this is something I want to share to entrepreneurs because, sitting on this side of the table, I see vulnerability from entrepreneurs all the time. They get so scared when they're pitching to us, but investors go through the same things too. I'm an immigrant, I'm a woman, I didn't have an industry knowledge. Imposter syndrome, this kind of like key phrase, I never heard it. I actually never understood the terms until I joined Pangaea Ventures. Until, I was 20 something years old, I never heard of the terms imposter syndrome until one day I realized, oh my goodness, I have it. And this is actually shared by all my other colleagues that are in this industry, actually not just female, anyone really, any investors do go the same things. And then, because I was from the outside of the industry, I didn't fit into the culture. I didn't speak the same language. I didn't see the same opportunities. And so it took me a while to actually realize my unique power of being different in the venture capital world. I bring a unique lens to the opportunities. Today, if you go on our website, you'll see that Pangaea Ventures really talk about the impact. We actually say we're impact investors. We are launching an impact fund. We have today 50% female partners. I'm not saying that I'm the reason for that, but when I joined, we didn't have female partners. Right now, we have 50% female partners. And you think that you're just a junior person as part of the team, and this goes to everyone, whether entrepreneurs or corporate employees. Like, you think you're just a small sort of employee, but I think you actually are changing and making the difference. I look at companies differently. I source companies differently. If you talk to investors, sourcing is one of the most important things because you want to find opportunities where it's not a lot of competition and all that. I looked at so many companies when I was working at Pangaea on the first month because I was so excited. I was so curious. Oh my goodness, there's companies that can 3D print, human organs. There's companies that can do X, Y, Z. That it was so sci-fi for me, and I was just genuinely interested. And I think that's the reason that they hired me, because I brought on these companies in front of my team and they're like, where did you find these companies? And I'm like, well, I just looked at, where I was interested. I found a community of investors instead of, I felt at the time that, it was very transactional in this industry, to be honest with you. Everyone was just doing their own things. Everyone kind of knew each other, but no one was really friends. And so I started getting people together. Why don't we go out for drinks? Why don't we go out for, fun conversations? And then we have a community of investors. We're all friends now today. And so this is something that I think I turned, upside down from the imposter syndrome and all that into a superpower. I'm almost done. And so I put together this really quickly here, but it's not to sort of brag about my achievement or anything like that. But I look back at the journey of my career and, my investing career for 3 years. And I realized that I've been given such an amazing opportunities to actually go out there and showcase my story and showcase my expertise that I've developed, industry knowledge that I work so hard to acquire, and the investors that I want to become. And I think it's being recognized by the industry. It's not just the event today that, Colin invited me to, but it's also the other industry events, aerospace event, packaging events. They want to hear different thoughts. And I think this is a proof that the diversity of thought is being recognized by the industry. So this is my last slide. Yes, this is my last slide. So, going back to, before that I said it was like an uphill battle. I think, at the end of the day, whatever work that you're doing, and I think entrepreneurs 100% understand that this is something, the mission is often larger than the career or the job that you want. I now have a community of Canadian women in VC. There's about 200 of us that are within the membership in the community. You can search Canadian Women in VC. The website should come up. There's a Global Woman in VC that I'm a part of, and I'm really active member and taking parts in. There's about 3,000 investors in the community there, and we're all trying to support each other. Shout out to Canadian Women in VC. I'm on the committee. I just joined this year. Our sort of mission is actually to change the face of venture capital. And when we were thinking about that, we wanted to change the face of venture capital to reflect Canadian ecosystem, actually globally. We want to see the types of innovations that are, going to be funded, going towards, the people that are not just like look the same. So yes, that's sort of the end of my story.
Well, thank you very much. I know you rushed through this. I'm sure there was a lot more you could have gone through and told us. So diversity is huge. Obviously, it's been a big impact in the last couple of years, especially showcased on media and things like that. So one of the first questions is, as you're still facing diversity, I know you're making an impact in a young career in investing in the investment industry, 3 years. So you're still very young in the industry in that sense. Yeah. So when you're looking to make investments and you're making impacts, does this diversity come to the top of the chain of qualifications for investing in a company? Do you look at that first? Is that like an important criteria, or that's just one of many, would you say?
Mm,
If you had to
yeah.
choose top three, would it be a top three criteria?
Yeah, it's not the top three criteria today, but I think because, who you are as investors kind of reflect that a little bit. Like, I'm not saying that I'm looking for only like a Asian female, founders to fund, and that kind of checks the box that, adding to the list of our portfolio companies, to the many, I don't know, look and feel that we have, is not really that. But I think who you are as investors will reflect through the opportunities you see on the investment side of things. I think you will see more opportunities and more problems to be solved than just what you're familiar with. And so I think that's one of the key influencing decision. The diversity of, management team is a key is a consideration. We do measure the impact, the diversity, through our impact reports. It's not being prioritized right now, but I hope that it will be eventually.
Okay. And then as you're making these investments with companies, how often do you do top-up investments or reinvestments in the companies you're already working with? Is that common practice for
Yes.
for your firm or for yourself, or
Yes.
not really? Once in and then sort of move on to the next
100%.
project.
Yeah, so a little bit about our investment criteria, I guess. So we invest $3 to $5 million US into companies with early commercial revenue, being in hard tech, so physical products. I always say science-based products. If it's something you can touch with science behind it, that's a fit for our fund. We always reserve capital to follow on, because oftentimes it's more than just software companies where companies need more money and more time to actually scale, and so we will always reserve money for our follow-on investments.
All right. Now, on a personal note, as a female Asian in the investment world, so coming from a background of color as well, how did your family react that you're not doing a typical career that's stereotypical to what, you're not being a doctor, you're not being an accountant, you're not being a lawyer, you're going into the investment world? How did that impact you personally? Because there's a lot of young people out there that they are getting pushed into that typical career, as we know. What advice would you give them based on your experience?
I'll be honest with you. My parents don't know what venture capital is. And venture capital is a very new concept for Asian countries. I would say Southeast Asia, except for Singapore. And that's something that I hope to be able to, gain my expertise, being at the fund here. I'm not saying that I'm going to go home, but, that's something that I consider all the time. VCs is a very new concept still in emerging markets. In Thailand, I probably think there's one VC fund and the rest is CVC, corporate venture capital funds. And that's actually the wave we see, globally too. It always starts with corporate venture capital funds. And then with the successful, entrepreneurs that have exited the companies, they would then take the money to start a VC funds. We don't have that kind of success stories yet at where I'm from. So actually, not just my parents. When I explain to my friends what I do for a living, I can't say that I'm a venture capital because they don't understand what it is.
Okay. And then if you had to give, and I got a last question here before we move on to the next presenter. If you had to give your younger self advice from what you've learned now going through this journey you've got to so far, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give yourself?
I would say this is my favorite motto in mind, I guess. It sounds cliche, but I truly believe rising tide lifts all boats. Like, this is I know some people hate this saying, but I actually think that if you want a better situation for your careers, you want a better positions for yourselves, you need to support the community. I actually think, we're on this slide, which is perfect. I actually think it's my duty to make it easier for other people to join venture capital funds who are from the unlikely backgrounds like myself before. I have the duty to make it easier and pave the way for other females to actually enter this career, and thinking that is also viable, because it's very intimidating to be an investor, because people always ask, what do you know, right? And so, in order to increase the diversity of this side of the table, you need more people to understand that this is a viable career. So, I probably have spoken to a lot of people. I don't know if anyone I've spoken to is listening today, but I hope it reflects through sort of like my participation in conversations that I engage with, that I'm very passionate about helping people beyond myself.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure you got more stories to tell. And hopefully, we get to know more about you, Kookai, right? As we get to know, and hopefully we'll get to meet soon and have a drink as well. So,
Definitely.
Colin, don't know if you want to add to that.
The one last thing I did want to add is we do have one question here from the audience. I wanted to add. I don't think you covered this one yet. Leslie Duncan, who's our good friends at SFU VentureLabs, who's co-hosted this show
see in the
before.
Q&A.
Yeah. So Leslie asks, Kookai, what is the biggest thing you think women founders can do to get past the stereotypes in tech science investing?
To get past the stereotypes, I know it's very easy to sort of feel like, you're the odd one out in the room. That's something that I shared with my presentation, and that's the same with, women entrepreneurs as well. But I think the first thing that you can do is to get rid of that mindset. It is to show up as a scientist versus a female scientist. I'm showing up as an investor, not a female investor. I'm showing up as, a venture associate, not, an immigrant venture associate, if that makes sense. I think that's something that you have to get past first, because the way you show up will reflect, and how you think about it too, will actually reflect through your presentations and how you kind of pitch your stories as well. I think, that's the most important thing, and what you can do like today. Aside from that, data, if you're a scientist and you're creating new novel products, if it's something truly unique and novel, people are going to notice it. People are going to see it. And investors that don't see it, maybe they're not worth working for or working with, right? I think there's two things here that people need to know, not just women, that you can actually select who you want to work with. Investors don't always select you. You select investors too. So that's something to keep in mind. If they don't align with your values, maybe it's time to look elsewhere, but also obviously take that advice with a grain of salt as well. Maybe there's something to, be taken here, whether that's scaling challenges or whatever it is. But I think you have to kind of just get rid of that mindset and just show up as a scientist.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm sure you can't hear the round of applause, but it is happening.
Thank you.
Through the video screens.